The station was nearly silent, except for the creaking of metal, the distant howl of wind, and the static of a broken announcement speaker repeating a message from 2 weeks ago. "Attention passengers, please proceed to Gate 3 for final evacuation." Ethan Ward crouched behind a toppled luggage cart, eyes scanning the tracks through the broken glass wall. His breathing was slow, trained, but the thud of his heartbeat was deafening in his ears. The platform beyond was deserted, or at least it looked that way. He checked his watch. It was 4:57 p.m. If the information he'd gathered from the last working radio was correct, the final government rescue train would pass through this zone at exactly 5 p.m. And it wouldn't stop. If he wasn't on board, that would be it. He'd be trapped in the infected zone. The zone that used to be called Seattle. Behind him, footsteps. Light. Careful. Ethan turned quickly, raising his makeshift weapon, a steel rod he'd pried from a stair railing. "It's me," came a whisper. "Don't swing that thing." The voice belonged to Samira Kale, a former nurse he'd met just 3 days ago. She had a bandage wrapped tightly around her upper arm where a broken door had sliced her. She was resourceful, level-headed, and fast, something Ethan had come to value deeply in the chaos. "Did you see them?" she asked, sliding down next to him. He shook his head. "No movement yet. But they're around. They always are." The infected weren't fast. Not like in the movies. But they were everywhere. Stumbling shadows. Quiet at first, until they sensed movement or sound. Then they'd lurch forward, unrelenting, driven by something not quite hunger and not quite instinct. "Train's coming in 3 minutes," Ethan whispered. Samira nodded, but there was tension in her jaw. "You think it'll actually come?" "I don't think we have another option," Ethan replied. There was a sharp clank in the distance, metal hitting concrete. Both of them froze. The echo traveled unnaturally long through the hollow building, bouncing off broken walls and cracked ceilings. A sound like that could bring them. "We need to move," Samira said, standing. "Now." They sprinted. Silent, practiced steps. Staying low, using shadows. Through the ruins of what had been a coffee shop, past the rusted remains of vending machines, until they reached the final hallway that led to the outdoor platform. Ethan peered through the glass door. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the tracks. The wind carried dust and a strange scent, damp wood, ash, and something else Ethan had never been able to name. "There," Samira whispered, pointing. Far down the tracks, a shape. Low. Smooth. Not staggering like the infected. It was the train. But between them and the tracks stood at least 6 infected, silent silhouettes in torn clothing, swaying gently. One of them dragged a briefcase behind it. Another had a firefighter's helmet still perched on its head. "Too many," Ethan muttered. "We go around?" "No time." He turned to her. "We run. Fast and straight. No stopping." She nodded, gripping the strap of her bag tighter. Ethan pushed the door open slowly. A quiet creak. One of the infected turned slightly, its head lifting. Then another. No more waiting. "Go!" They burst from the doorway, feet pounding the ground, weaving between concrete columns. The infected moved, slow at first, then jerky, faster. Arms reaching, mouths opening in silent moans. Samira ducked under a swinging arm, turned sharply, and kept running. Ethan rammed into one of the creatures, knocking it to the ground with his shoulder. No stopping. Not even to look back. The train was moving. It wasn't slowing. They were 30 feet from the edge of the platform when Samira screamed. Ethan twisted mid-run. She had stumbled, her foot caught on a broken cable, and was scrambling to rise. One of the infected was closer than he thought. "No," he yelled, turning back, ignoring the sting in his legs. He reached her just as the infected lunged. Swinging the rod with everything he had, he knocked the creature aside, grabbed Samira by the arm, and pulled her to her feet. The train was passing. They ran for it, parallel now, the sound of the wheels roaring in their ears. "Jump!" Ethan shouted. Samira leaped, arms grabbing a rail. Ethan followed, catching hold of the same bar. They climbed, legs scrambling against the side of the car, and hauled themselves up. The train sped away, leaving the infected behind, still reaching, their groans fading into the distance. Inside the train, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan and Samira lay on the floor, gasping for air. But there were no cheers, no soldiers, no safety. Just silence. And the hum of the rails. The dim fluorescent lights inside the train flickered sporadically, casting long shadows that danced eerily along the walls. The sudden silence after the chaos outside was almost suffocating. Ethan pressed his back against the cold metal wall, muscles still trembling from the adrenaline. Beside him, Samira's breaths came in shallow bursts as she wiped a smear of dirt from her cheek. "This isn't over," Ethan whispered, eyes scanning the empty corridor ahead. The train was a long one, stretching out like a steel serpent into the darkness. "We don't know where this thing is headed. Or if it's safe." Samira nodded, her gaze fixed on the flickering overhead lights. "When I first got on, there was no one else. Just this train, moving through the night. No guards, no announcements. It's like they sent it out, then abandoned it." Ethan frowned. "Why would they do that? Maybe they couldn't risk stopping. Maybe there's nowhere safe to go." Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly masked it with determination. For a moment, neither of them moved. The train hummed steadily, its rhythmic clatter against the rails strangely hypnotic but unwelcoming. Then, from somewhere down the car, a faint sound, a soft tapping, like fingernails against metal, echoed. Ethan stiffened. "You hear that?" Samira nodded, gripping her makeshift weapon tighter, a sturdy pipe she'd found near the station. They crept toward the noise, each step cautious, every nerve alert. Around the corner, a door slid open with a hiss. Inside the dimly lit compartment, they saw a young woman, maybe in her 20s, sitting on the floor. Her clothes were torn, hair messy, and her eyes wide with fear. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Are you survivors?" Ethan glanced at Samira, who nodded silently. "Yes," Ethan said gently. "We're trying to get out." "Where are we headed?" The woman swallowed hard. "I don't know. I've been on this train for days. It's supposed to take us to a safe zone, but it never stops. People have disappeared. Some say it's a trap." Samira knelt beside her. "What happened to the others?" The woman's gaze flickered with pain. "Some didn't make it. Others changed." She shuddered. "It's not just the infected outside anymore. Something else is on this train." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He'd hoped this journey would mean safety, but it was starting to feel like a moving prison. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and the train jerked sharply. The young woman screamed, clutching her arms around herself. "Hold on!" Ethan shouted, steadying himself against the wall. From the ceiling vents, a faint scratching sound emerged, low and desperate. Something was moving, something trying to get inside. Samira raised her pipe, eyes darting to the vent nearest them. The scratching grew louder, accompanied by a wet, slurping noise that made Ethan's stomach churn. "Not infected," Samira said grimly. "Something else." The train shook again, this time with a violent jolt that threw Ethan and Samira to the floor. Lights went out completely, plunging the car into darkness. "Keep calm," Ethan hissed, reaching for his small flashlight. The beam cut a thin circle through the pitch black. Around them, the tapping returned, now rapid and frantic, like dozens of fingernails clawing at metal. "We need to get to the front of the train," Samira whispered. "There has to be a way to stop this." Ethan nodded and helped the young woman to her feet. The trio crept through the darkened corridors, every shadow a possible threat. Occasionally, distant thumps and moans reverberated through the train cars, reminders of the infected still lurking somewhere outside, or worse, aboard. Halfway to the front, they passed a car filled with overturned luggage and broken seats, signs of a struggle. Ethan's heart pounded. Whoever had been here before them hadn't left in one piece. Suddenly, a wet, scraping noise came from the ceiling above. Ethan shone his light upward. For a split second, he thought he saw movement, pale, slick limbs clawing just beyond the ceiling panels. "Run!" Samira yelled. They broke into a sprint, racing down the narrow aisle, breaths ragged, the sound of pursuit crashing behind them. At the front of the train, they reached the control car. The door was locked. Ethan slammed his shoulder against it, then the other. "Come on." Samira pulled at her bag and produced a small crowbar. "Try this." With a grunt, Ethan jammed the tool between the door and frame. After several tense seconds, the lock gave way with a metallic snap. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, the control panel dark and lifeless. A small digital map blinked weakly, showing the train's progress along the rail. Ethan's fingers flew over the controls, trying to power it up. "I don't know these systems," he admitted. Samira peered over his shoulder. "If we can stop the train, maybe we can get off safely." Suddenly, the entire car shook violently. The lights flickered back on for a moment, revealing a shadow at the far end of the car. The figure was hunched, moving with unnatural jerks. Its eyes reflected the light like glowing coals. The infected had found them. Ethan grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby rack. "We hold them off," he said. "You two find a way out once I stop the train." Samira's eyes widened. "No way. We stay together." The infected lurched forward, arms outstretched. Ethan tightened his grip on the wrench, ready for the fight. The world outside the train was a nightmare, but right now, survival meant fighting the nightmare inside. Ethan tightened his grip on the wrench, his muscles tensing for the first strike. The infected creature moved unnaturally, jerking forward with sudden bursts of speed that defied its slow, shambling exterior. Its eyes, glowing dimly in the flickering light, locked onto him with a feral hunger that sent a chill down his spine. Samira and the young woman, whose name Ethan learned was Lila, backed toward the control panel. "Help me with the emergency brake," Samira whispered urgently. "If we can stop the train, we can get off, somewhere safe." Ethan lunged first, swinging the wrench with all his strength. The blow connected with a sickening thud against the creature's shoulder, knocking it off balance but not stopping it. It snarled, a horrible, guttural sound, and swung a clawed hand toward Ethan's head. He ducked just in time, feeling the rush of air as the claws grazed past his cheek. Sweat dripped into his eyes as he prepared to strike again. This was no ordinary infected. Something about it was different. Behind him, Samira managed to pull the emergency brake lever. The train gave a loud screech as metal wheels dragged against the rails, slowing down, but it was not enough. The creature recovered quickly and charged, arms raised. Ethan braced himself and struck with the wrench once more, this time aiming for the head. The creature reeled backward, momentarily stunned. Ethan seized the chance, swinging again and again until the creature collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. Breathing heavily, Ethan looked around. The car was silent except for the train's decelerating hum and their ragged breaths. Samira wiped her brow and looked at the control panel, which now glowed steadily. "It's stopping," she said. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before it halts completely." Lila shivered, hugging herself. "What now?" "We're out in the middle of nowhere." Ethan stood, moving to the small window at the front. Outside, darkness stretched in all directions, broken only by faint silhouettes of ruined buildings and flickering street lamps. No rescue teams, no safe zones in sight. "We find a way out," Ethan said firmly. "We stick together, and we move fast." Samira nodded, gathering what little supplies they had. "There's a maintenance hatch near the back of this car," she said. "It might lead outside." "Good," Ethan replied. "Let's go." The train came to a gradual stop with a final screech that echoed through the tunnels ahead. They hurried toward the rear door, the eerie silence reminding them how vulnerable they were. Samira worked the latch on the hatch. With a grunt, she pushed it open, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. "Careful," Ethan warned. "We don't know what's down there." One by one, they climbed down, the cold metal steps slick with moisture. At the bottom, they found themselves in a narrow service tunnel running alongside the tracks. The air was stale and thick, with a faint scent of rust and damp earth. "We need to keep moving," Ethan said. "The train's alarm system might trigger if anyone's still on board." As they crept forward, the faint sound of distant groans reached their ears. Not the mechanical noises of the train, but the unmistakable moans of the infected somewhere in the darkness ahead. "Looks like we're not alone," Lila whispered. Ethan motioned for silence. The three moved cautiously, shadows stretching like ghosts on the cracked tunnel walls. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the tunnel's far end. The group froze as two infected stumbled into view, their eyes sunken and dull. Samira raised her pipe, but Ethan held up a hand. "We can't afford a fight here. We have to be smarter." He scanned the tunnel and spotted a pile of old crates stacked near a side vent. "Follow me," he said quietly. They slipped behind the crates, holding their breath as the infected shuffled past, nearly brushing against them. Once the creatures disappeared, Ethan exhaled slowly. "That was too close." Samira nodded. "We need to find a way out of this tunnel." After several minutes of crawling through the narrow, damp passage, the tunnel opened into an old subway platform. Rusted signs hung from the ceiling, the letters faded but still readable, Pine Street Station. The platform was deserted. Broken benches and graffiti covered the walls. Beyond the platform, a dark stairwell led up, toward what Ethan hoped was fresh air. "We should check for supplies here," Samira suggested. Lila's eyes lit up. "Maybe food or medical stuff." They cautiously searched the station, finding some discarded backpacks, a few unopened water bottles, and a first aid kit. It wasn't much, but it was enough to renew their spirits. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from above. Ethan froze. "Someone's coming." They scrambled to hide behind a wall, pressing themselves against the cold bricks. A group of survivors appeared at the top of the stairwell, 5 people, armed with makeshift weapons and wary eyes. Their leader, a tall man with a grizzled beard, scanned the platform carefully. Ethan stepped forward slowly, raising his hands in peace. "We're not infected. We want to join you." The leader's eyes narrowed, but after a tense moment, he nodded. "We've been waiting for others. It's dangerous out there, but we have shelter nearby." Samira and Lila followed Ethan up the stairs, hearts pounding as they left the eerie station behind. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the stale tunnel. The city was a shadow of its former self, streets cracked, buildings crumbled, and distant fires flickered like dying stars. But for the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. They were no longer alone. And maybe, just maybe, survival was still possible. The small group led Ethan, Samira, and Lila through winding alleys and ruined streets, their footsteps echoing softly under the pale moonlight. The city had become a ghost town, its vibrant life replaced by eerie silence and the constant threat of danger lurking in every shadow. The leader, whose name was Marcus, moved with cautious confidence. His eyes flicked to every corner, every window, searching for any sign of movement. Behind him, 4 others followed, their faces hardened by loss and survival. "We have a safe house," Marcus explained in a low voice. "Not far from here. Walls are strong, supplies stocked. But space is limited." Ethan glanced at Samira and Lila, who exchanged uncertain looks. Trust was scarce in this world, and strangers even scarcer. As they walked, Marcus began to ask questions, his tone sharp but fair. "How long have you been out there?" "Since the outbreak," Ethan replied. "We were on the train, trying to get away." Marcus nodded slowly. "Most trains stopped running weeks ago. Yours must be one of the last." Samira added, "We ran into infected on board. Different kind. More aggressive." A shadow passed over Marcus's face. "You're lucky to be alive." After a tense 10-minute walk, they reached a fortified building, once a small community center. Steel bars covered the windows, and sandbags were piled against the walls. Inside, a handful of survivors greeted them with wary eyes and quiet nods. A young girl clung tightly to an older woman's side, her face pale and scared. A man busied himself patching a torn curtain, while another stood guard near the entrance, a crossbow slung over his shoulder. Marcus gestured toward a small room. "You can rest here for now. Eat, wash up. We'll talk soon." Ethan sank onto the worn couch, exhaustion crashing down like a wave. Samira and Lila flopped onto a nearby mattress, relief mingling with anxiety. Lila's voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you think it's really safe?" Samira gave a small, tired smile. "Safe enough. For now." Days passed in a strange rhythm, constant vigilance mixed with brief moments of normalcy. They shared stories, meals made from scavenged cans, and plans for the uncertain future. But trust was fragile. Every noise outside sparked tension. Every unfamiliar face was a potential threat. One evening, as the survivors gathered around a dim lantern, Marcus addressed the group. "We can't stay here forever," he said firmly. "The infected are spreading. Soon, this place won't be safe." Ethan leaned forward. "What's the plan?" Marcus glanced around. "We move. There's a rumored evacuation point, about 50 miles east. Military might still be operating there." Samira frowned. 50 miles through infected territory? Marcus shrugged. "Better than waiting here to be surrounded." Lila swallowed hard. "What about supplies?" "We'll gather what we can," Marcus said. "But speed is essential." That night, sleep came fitfully. Ethan lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him. By dawn, preparations were underway. The group packed weapons, rationed food, and checked gear. Samira double-checked the pipe she'd kept as a weapon. Ethan sharpened the wrench's edge with a small stone. As they stepped outside, the cold morning air bit at their skin. The city was waking up, not with the sound of life, but with distant groans and the restless shuffle of infected. The journey ahead was perilous. Each step could lead to safety, or death. The group moved cautiously through the streets, sticking close to the shadows. They avoided open areas, taking back alleys and side routes whenever possible. Hours into the trek, a sudden noise froze them in place, a low growl followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps running. From around the corner, a lone figure appeared, stumbling and gasping for breath. "Help!" the stranger cried. "They're coming!" Before anyone could react, a small horde of infected burst from a nearby alley, snarling and lunging forward. Chaos erupted. Samira swung her pipe, cracking the skull of the nearest infected with a sickening thud. Ethan slammed his wrench into another, shoving it back. The stranger, a woman with wild eyes, fought desperately with a broken bottle. Marcus barked orders. "Fall back. To the safe house." The group retreated, fighting their way through the swarm. Lila tripped, and Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her up just as an infected lunged. They barely made it back inside, slamming the reinforced door behind them. Breathless and shaken, they counted heads. Everyone was there, except the stranger. Marcus cursed under his breath. "We can't leave her out there." Ethan clenched his fists. "We don't have a choice. Not now." Samira looked at the closed door, eyes haunted. "We'll have to keep moving. There's no time to waste." That night, the safe house was quieter than usual. Fear and fatigue hung heavy in the air. Ethan stared into the darkness, wondering how long they could keep running, how long they could trust the fragile bonds they'd formed. In a world overrun by the infected, survival meant more than fighting the undead. It meant fighting doubt, fear, and the darkness within. Tomorrow, they would face the unknown again. But for now, they had each other. And that was enough. Morning came with a heavy silence hanging over the survivors' safe house. Ethan rubbed his tired eyes and glanced around the small room. The faces of those around him reflected a mixture of exhaustion and determination. This group was battered but not broken. Outside, the city remained a desolate graveyard. The infected roamed like shadows, their groans faint but ever-present. The group had only one choice: keep moving. Marcus gathered everyone in the main room. "We leave in an hour," he announced. "We take the back roads. Avoid the main streets at all costs." Ethan nodded. "We'll keep close, move fast, and watch each other's backs." Lila, sitting quietly in a corner, looked up. "What if the military isn't there? What if it's just another trap?" Samira met her gaze. "Then we find another way. But hope's better than waiting to die here." The survivors packed their meager supplies once again, loading backpacks with canned food, bottles of water, and the weapons they'd gathered, a mix of pipes, knives, and makeshift clubs. Ethan checked his wrench, the metal cold and reassuring in his hands. As they slipped out into the early dawn, the city felt different, quieter, somehow. The group moved cautiously through narrow alleys, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the thick fog rolling in. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a sharp crack, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Everyone froze. "Stay alert," Marcus whispered. "Could be friendly, or not." The group veered off the alley and crouched behind a fallen dumpster. Ethan peered cautiously around the corner. Ahead, a figure darted between abandoned cars, carrying a rifle. "Who is that?" Lila whispered nervously. "Could be another group of survivors," Samira said, voice tense. Marcus motioned for the group to follow quietly. They moved carefully toward the figure, weapons ready. As they drew closer, Ethan called out, "We don't want trouble. We're just trying to survive." The figure froze, rifle raised but lowered slightly. A young man stepped into the dim light, eyes wide with wariness. "My name's Cole," he said quickly. "I've been scouting for supplies. Haven't seen any friendly faces for days." Marcus stepped forward. "We're heading east, toward the rumored evacuation point. You're welcome to join us if you want." Cole hesitated, then nodded. "I've heard about that place. Could be our best chance." With Cole in tow, the group continued, their numbers growing but so did the tension. Every step forward felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong move could spell disaster. As midday approached, they reached the outskirts of the city. The ruins gave way to broken highways and overgrown fields. Here, the infected seemed less dense, but the danger was no less real. "We're close to a small town," Marcus said. "If it's still safe, we can rest and resupply." The group approached cautiously. Houses stood empty, doors hanging open, windows shattered. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, a shrill scream pierced the air. Everyone spun toward the sound. In the distance, a figure ran, pursued by two infected. The infected snarled, their movements desperate and frantic. Without hesitation, Ethan dashed forward, wrench raised. The chase was short but brutal. Ethan struck the first infected across the back of the head, sending it crashing into a fence. Samira swung her pipe at the second, knocking it to the ground. The survivor, a middle-aged woman with dirt-streaked clothes, collapsed in exhaustion. "Thank you," she gasped. "I thought I was done for." Marcus helped her to her feet. "We're all trying to make it." The woman introduced herself as Claire. She explained that the town had been overrun weeks ago, and she'd been hiding in a basement, running low on supplies. The group quickly scavenged the nearest houses. They found canned food, bottled water, and a few medical supplies, enough to keep them going. But the respite was short-lived. As they prepared to leave, a sudden noise erupted from the street, a deep, guttural growl followed by a chorus of snarls. The infected had found them. From every direction, they poured into the town like a dark tide, relentless and hungry. Ethan's heart pounded. "We need to get out. Now." They fought their way through the narrow streets, weapons swinging and fists pounding. The infected were fast, aggressive, and seemingly endless. Samira shouted, "To the trucks!" They sprinted toward an old pickup in a rusty van parked near the edge of town. Ethan jumped into the van's driver's seat, his hands shaking as he started the engine. The others piled in, banging doors shut just as the infected reached them. With a roar, Ethan floored the accelerator. The van lurched forward, tires screeching on cracked asphalt. Behind them, the infected chased, snarling and snapping. "Hold on!" Marcus yelled. The van barreled down the highway, weaving through abandoned cars and debris. But the infected weren't giving up. A massive figure, a mutated infected, larger and more ferocious than the others, leapt onto the van's hood, slamming claws into the windshield. Cracks spiderwebbed across the glass. Ethan swerved sharply, trying to shake the beast, but it held on tight. "Use the crowbar!" Samira shouted. Lila scrambled to the back seat and grabbed the crowbar from the supplies. She swung it with all her might, striking the creature's arm. The beast roared in pain and finally released its grip, tumbling onto the road. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed the van harder, putting distance between them and the relentless horde. "We need to find a place to hide," Marcus said, breathing heavily. Ethan scanned the roadside and spotted a small gas station, its lights flickering faintly. "Pull in there," he shouted. The van skidded to a stop beside the building. The survivors piled out and barricaded the doors with whatever they could find. Inside, the gas station was dark but intact. Shelves were mostly empty, but a few snacks and bottles of water remained. They took a moment to catch their breath, hearts still pounding. "We made it," Claire said, voice trembling. "But for how long?" Ethan looked at his weary companions. "We keep moving. We don't stop until we're safe." Samira nodded. "One step at a time." Outside, the infected moaned in the distance, a haunting reminder that the fight was far from over. But in that moment, they found something rare, a glimmer of hope. The flickering neon sign of the gas station cast long shadows on the cracked pavement as the survivors huddled inside. Their breaths hung heavy in the cold air, the tension almost palpable. Outside, the distant groans of the infected drifted in, reminding them that safety was fragile, if it existed at all. Ethan leaned against a dusty counter, running his fingers through his tangled hair. The van was parked just outside, engines cooled but ready. Everyone was catching their breath, but the unease in the room was thick. Marcus paced near the doorway, eyes sharp. "We need a plan. We can't just keep running blindly." Samira pulled out a crumpled map she'd found in one of the town's abandoned buildings. The edges were worn, but the routes were clear enough. "There's a highway that runs northeast," she said. "If we follow it, we might find a safer zone. Military checkpoints, maybe." Lila sat on the floor, her knees drawn to her chest. "And if we don't?" "We keep moving," Ethan said firmly. "One step at a time." Suddenly, a noise came from the back of the store, a soft shuffle, barely audible. Everyone tensed, weapons raised. "Who's there?" Marcus called out. A figure stumbled from the shadows, hands raised. It was a man, dirty and bruised but alive. "My name's Jared," he said breathlessly. "I've been hiding nearby. Heard your truck." Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Ethan. "You're welcome to join us. But trust has to be earned." Jared nodded solemnly. "I understand." With the new addition, the group prepared to leave. Ethan checked their supplies again, nearly gone, but enough for the journey ahead. As they stepped outside, the night air was cool and still. The infected had quieted, but Ethan knew better than to let his guard down. They moved along the highway, careful to stay in the shadows. The road stretched endlessly ahead, cracked and overgrown, flanked by abandoned vehicles and decaying buildings. Hours passed with nothing but the sounds of the wind and their cautious footsteps. Suddenly, a distant shout shattered the silence. "Help! Over here!" The group froze. "Could be survivors," Marcus whispered. Ethan nodded, signaling the group to move cautiously toward the sound. They found a young man trapped under a fallen beam in the ruins of a collapsed building. His leg was pinned, and panic clouded his eyes. "Please, help me," he cried. Samira rushed forward, working to lift the debris. With a collective effort, they freed him. "Thanks," he gasped. "I'm Ryan." Marcus frowned. "How long have you been here?" "Days. I was scavenging when the building collapsed." Ethan scanned the horizon. "We're heading to a military evacuation point northeast." Ryan nodded. "I've heard rumors. It's supposed to be safe." The group moved on, numbers now growing, but the strain was obvious. Every face told a story of loss, fear, and desperate hope. As dawn approached, they spotted an old farmhouse. It looked abandoned but intact, a potential shelter. Inside, the air was stale but safe. They rested, sharing what little food they had. Ethan looked around at the faces illuminated by the weak morning light. Every one of them was fighting a silent battle, between despair and determination. That's when Jared spoke up. "There's something you should know. This area, it's not just the infected we have to worry about." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jared's voice lowered. "There are others. People who've given up on survival and turned to worse things. Raiders. They take what they want, supplies, people." Ethan's heart sank. "So even if we avoid the infected, we're not safe?" Jared shook his head. "Not unless we're prepared." The group fell into a tense silence. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed outside. Weapons were drawn in an instant. Samira moved toward the window, peering out cautiously. Her breath caught. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, not infected, but heavily armed humans. Raiders. Marcus gritted his teeth. "We've got company." Ethan whispered urgently, "We can't fight them here. We need to move, now." They scrambled to gather their gear as the raiders advanced, shouting threats and smashing through the farmhouse doors. Ethan led the group out a back window, ducking into the surrounding woods. Branches scraped their skin as they fled into the darkness. Behind them, the farmhouse burned, a cruel reminder that in this broken world, danger came from every direction. As they ran, Ethan's mind raced. The infected were terrifying, but the living could be even worse. Trust was harder than ever to find. But they had no choice but to keep going. Because survival wasn't just about outrunning the infected, it was about outlasting the darkness within humanity. The forest swallowed the survivors like a dark, protective cloak. Branches snapped underfoot as they hurried through the underbrush, the distant glow of the burning farmhouse casting a faint orange hue on the horizon. The acrid smell of smoke stung their nostrils, a grim reminder of the cost of their narrow escape. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, not just from exertion but from the knowledge that the raiders were still out there, hunting. He glanced at the group, weary, battered, but moving with a grim determination. They had survived so much already, and despite the exhaustion, no one dared to stop. Marcus, always the strategist, whispered from the front. "We need to find higher ground. From there, we can see if the coast is clear. And maybe spot that evacuation point." The group nodded in agreement, and they pressed onward, climbing a steep ridge thick with tangled roots and loose stones. The terrain was unforgiving, but every step forward was a victory. When they finally reached the summit, dawn was breaking. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold, a brief moment of beauty in an unforgiving world. Ethan scanned the landscape below through the morning mist. The highway stretched far, broken and choked with abandoned cars, but clear of immediate danger. Beyond that lay a patchwork of fields and woods, and, far in the distance, the glimmer of water. "The coast," Ethan breathed. "That's our way out." Lila's eyes widened. "You really think the military evacuation point is by the coast?" Samira pulled out the worn map again, tracing a route with her finger. "It has to be. It's the only logical spot for a last-ditch evacuation." Suddenly, a low growl rumbled behind them. Everyone spun around. From the trees emerged a small group of infected, slower, but relentless. They had caught their scent. We have to move, Marcus urged, raising his makeshift spear. Ethan took a deep breath. Form a circle. Watch your backs. The survivors backed away, weapons ready. The infected lurched forward, their ragged moans filling the air. The fight was brutal but quick. Ethan swung his wrench, connecting with a skull. Samira knocked one down with a powerful blow from her pipe. Lila stabbed with a sharpened piece of metal she'd found, her hands trembling but steady. When the last infected fell, the group stood in silence, catching their breath. Too close, Jared muttered. We're being followed. Ethan nodded grimly. We're almost at the highway. We have to keep moving. The survivors descended the ridge, making their way toward the cracked asphalt below. The highway was eerily quiet, but the weight of unseen danger pressed down on them. As they moved, the ruined vehicles offered brief shelter, places to hide or scavenge supplies. Ethan spotted a half-buried backpack near a wrecked car. Inside, he found a map with handwritten notes, marks showing safe zones, dangerous areas, and rumored military checkpoints. This could help, Ethan said, showing it to Marcus. Marcus studied it carefully. It's recent. Whoever marked this was trying to survive, just like us. With renewed hope, the group quickened their pace, following the map's route. Hours passed under the harsh sun. The landscape shifted from urban decay to open fields, where tall grass whispered secrets in the wind. But the danger was far from gone. Suddenly, the sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed through the air. Everyone dropped to the ground. Gunfire! Lila hissed. Someone's out there. Ethan crawled toward a nearby ditch, peering over the edge. In the distance, he spotted figures moving cautiously between the trees, armed humans, watching. We've been spotted, Marcus said grimly. They're not infected. Raiders again? Samira asked. Could be. Or worse, another group of survivors who don't want us here. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't afford a confrontation now. Not when they were so close. We need to get out of sight, Ethan said quietly. And fast. Using the tall grass as cover, the group moved sideways, staying low. The armed figures scanned the area, their weapons trained on the highway. Tension built with every breath. Suddenly, a twig snapped beneath Ethan's foot. Heads turned. Run! Marcus shouted. Bullets whizzed past as the survivors sprinted through the fields, the gunfire growing louder behind them. They darted toward a dense thicket of trees, diving into the underbrush just as the raiders opened fire again. Heart pounding, Ethan looked around. The forest was thick here, providing much-needed cover. Keep moving, he urged. But then, Lila stumbled. Ethan grabbed her arm, steadying her. You okay? She nodded, wincing. Twisted my ankle. We can't leave you behind, Samira said firmly. Then we have to slow down, Ethan replied. The group formed a protective circle, moving as one, careful not to leave Lila vulnerable. After what felt like hours, the gunfire faded. We lost them, Marcus said cautiously. Ethan exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding. We're not safe yet, he said. But we're closer than ever. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the survivors set up a makeshift camp beneath the thick canopy. Exhaustion tugged at their limbs, but the weight of the day's dangers kept sleep at bay. Ethan stared into the fading light, the map spread before him. Tomorrow, they would cross the last stretch, the final divide between the infected zone and whatever safety awaited. He clenched his wrench tightly. No matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. Because survival wasn't just about escaping the infected. It was about holding on to hope, even when everything else was lost. Let me know when you want me to write Part 8, the final part of the story. Part 8, Dawn of New Hope. The night was restless. Every crack of a twig, every whisper of the wind set the survivors on edge. Lila's twisted ankle made their progress slow and painstaking, but no one dared to leave her behind. The forest around them felt alive with unseen threats, the groans of infected in the distance, the occasional rustle suggesting that others, less friendly than themselves, might be lurking close. Ethan sat by the small campfire, staring into the flickering flames as dawn began to chase away the night's shadows. The map lay folded beside him, the lines and notes blurred by sweat and dirt but still their only guide. "Tomorrow, we cross that last stretch," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. "The highway leads straight to the evacuation zone. If the rumors are true, there'll be soldiers, supplies, maybe even safety." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Safety feels like a stranger these days." Samira gave a faint smile. "Maybe it's time we introduced ourselves." Lila, wincing but determined, added, "We've come too far to stop now." Ethan nodded. "We rest today. Tomorrow, we fight for tomorrow." Morning light filtered through the trees as the group prepared to move again. The pain in Lila's ankle was evident, but she refused to be carried. Strength wasn't just physical, it was the will to survive, and she had that in spades. The highway stretched out before them, a cracked, twisted ribbon cutting through a devastated landscape. They moved cautiously, every step measured. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional distant groan of the infected and the soft crunch of their boots on gravel. Ahead, a dilapidated checkpoint stood guard, barricades made from rusted metal and abandoned vehicles. Ethan's heart pounded. This was it, the final barrier between them and whatever awaited beyond. "Stay alert," he whispered. "We don't know who or what's still here." As they approached, voices echoed, tense, urgent. Figures in military gear emerged from behind the barricades, weapons raised but lowered slightly as they saw the ragged group. "Hold," a soldier commanded. "Identify yourselves." Ethan stepped forward, hands raised. "We're survivors. Looking for the evacuation point." The soldier eyed them warily before signaling others to stand down. "Come inside," he said. "You're safe here, for now." Inside the checkpoint, the survivors were given water, medical aid, and, for the first time in weeks, a moment to breathe. A commander approached Ethan. "We've been holding this zone for days, trying to evacuate civilians and contain the outbreak." Ethan nodded. "We just want to get out. Start over." The commander's eyes softened. "We're doing our best. But the world outside is still dangerous. The infected, raiders, it's a war." Lila, sitting nearby, smiled faintly. "We've fought our own war to get here." That evening, as the survivors settled into temporary safety, Ethan stood looking out toward the horizon, the sun setting over a world still broken but not beyond repair. The journey had been brutal. Friends lost, dangers faced, and moments when hope seemed all but gone. But they had made it. Together. And that was the beginning of something new. Because even in a world overrun by the infected, humanity's greatest strength was its resilience. Its refusal to give up. Its hope for a dawn beyond the darkness. Ethan smiled to himself. They were survivors. And they would keep fighting, until the world was theirs again. The end. If you want, I can help with ideas for narration style, voice tone, or anything else for your audiobook project.